So, is Canada actually more expensive than the United States now? Because over the last few years, more and more Canadians have started seriously asking the question, should I move to the USA? And honestly, I get it. Housing costs have exploded, groceries somehow feel more expensive every single month, interest rates shocked a lot of families, and for many younger Canadians, it feels harder than ever to get ahead financially. Meanwhile, you scroll online and see Americans paying lower taxes, buying bigger homes, earning higher salaries, and suddenly moving south starts looking pretty tempting. But here's the thing, the internet only tells you half the story. Because yes, in many cases, Americans do make more money, but they also deal with healthcare costs, childcare costs, insurance costs, and completely different lifestyles depending on where they live. So, in today's video, we're breaking down the real costs of living between Canada and the United States in 2026, including salaries, taxes, housing, groceries, healthcare, childcare, transportation, and which country actually gives you the better lifestyle depending on your goals. By the end of this video, you'll probably realize there is no perfect answer. It really depends on who you are. So let's break it all down. Now, first, we need to establish something important. Comparing Canada and the United States is actually really difficult because both countries are huge. Living in Toronto is nothing like living in Calgary, and living in New York is nothing like living in Texas or Florida. So instead of comparing random averages, we're comparing similar city pairs. Toronto versus Chicago, Vancouver versus Seattle, Calgary versus Denver, and Montreal versus Minneapolis. Cities with somewhat similar climates, economies, and lifestyles. Because if you're a Canadian thinking about moving to the States, you're probably not comparing Toronto to rural Alabama. You're comparing places that feel somewhat similar culturally and economically. And honestly, some of the results surprised me. Let's start with income, because this is the biggest reason many Canadians are looking south. Higher salaries. And yes, overall, Americans generally do earn more, especially in industries like tech, finance, engineering, sales, and healthcare. In many major US cities, six-figure salaries are much more common than they are in Canada, especially in places like Seattle, Austin, Boston, or Denver. Meanwhile, in Canada, salaries tend to be more compressed, meaning the gap between middle income and high income isn't as dramatic. Now, at first glance, the US absolutely looks better. Higher incomes, lower taxes, more opportunity, but then reality kicks in because your gross salary means absolutely nothing if your expenses eat all of it. And that's where things start getting interesting. Let's talk housing, because this is the #1 expense for almost everybody watching this video. And honestly, this is where Canada has become extremely difficult, especially in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and increasingly places like Ottawa and Halifax too. Even smaller cities that used to be affordable have exploded in price over the last 5 years. Now yes, US housing has also increased significantly, but compared to the income, many American cities are still far more affordable. And one of the biggest differences is the type of housing you get. In many US cities, a middle-class family can still realistically buy a detached house with a yard, a 2-car garage, and significantly more square footage. Meanwhile, in many Canadian cities, that same family may only be able to afford a condo, a townhouse, or an older detached home much further outside the city. And that is exactly why so many Canadians are leaving expensive provinces like Ontario and British Columbia. Because for many families, it genuinely feels impossible to get ahead. But hold on, because now we need to talk about taxes, and this is where things get really misunderstood online. You constantly hear people say taxes in Canada are insane. And yes, income taxes in Canada are generally higher than in many US states, especially when you factor in CPP, EI, provincial taxes, sales tax, and carbon taxes. Meanwhile, states like Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and Washington have no state income tax at all, which sounds amazing until you realize that money has to come from somewhere. Because in Canada, many services are bundled into your taxes, healthcare being the biggest one. Now let's talk healthcare, because this is probably the single biggest lifestyle difference between both countries. And honestly, this topic gets extremely emotional online. Canadians complain about wait times, Americans complain about costs, and honestly, both are valid. In Canada, most doctor visits, surgeries, and hospitals stays are publicly covered. You don't pull out your credit card every time something happens medically, and that gives many Canadians a huge sense of security, especially families, retirees, people with chronic illnesses, or anyone worried about medical debt. Meanwhile, in the US, healthcare quality can be incredible. But if you don't have strong insurance, things can get expensive very quickly. And even with insurance, there are still deductibles, co-pays, prescriptions, out-of-network fees, and employer dependency. So yes, Americans often take home more money, but they also take on more personal financial responsibility. Depending on your situation, that can either feel incredibly freeing or incredibly stressful. Now, let's talk groceries in everyday life, because this is where many Canadians feel the pain lately. Food prices in Canada have climbed dramatically over the last few years, especially dairy, meat, produce, and restaurant prices. Part of that comes down to geography. Canada has a smaller population spread across a massive country. Transportation costs are higher, winters are harsher, and we import far more food. Meanwhile, the United States benefits from larger domestic agriculture, more competition, and economies of scale, which generally make groceries cheaper. Gas is also typically cheaper in the US, sometimes significantly cheaper depending on the state. And when you combine that with lower taxes, many Americans simply have more disposable income month to month. But again, there's another side to this conversation, because one area where Canada absolutely shines is raising families. And this is a huge reason why many people choose to stay here despite the higher costs. Canada has parental leave, subsidized daycare programs, public health care, child tax benefits, and statistically safer urban environments in many areas. In some provinces, daycare costs have dropped dramatically thanks to the $10 a day childcare rollout. Meanwhile, in the US, childcare can be unbelievably expensive, like mortgage payment expensive. And parental leave policies are often much weaker. So if you're young, single, career-focused, and highly ambitious, but the US may financially outperform Canada for you. But if you're raising kids, prioritizing stability, or wanting stronger social protections, Canada starts looking a lot more attractive. And honestly, that's why this debate is so complicated. Now, another thing people don't talk about enough is lifestyle, because the conversation isn't just about spreadsheets. It's about how you actually want to live. Canada generally offers a slower pace, more work-life balance, lower crime rates in many areas, and stronger social safety nets. The US often offers higher earning potential, faster career growth, lower taxes, and more economic upside. Neither is objectively better. It completely depends on your priorities, and honestly, I think that's the biggest takeaway from this entire conversation. Personally, I think the biggest challenge Canada faces right now is that the wages simply haven't kept up with the housing. That's really the core issue. Canadians can tolerate higher taxes when life still feels affordable. But when housing, groceries, utilities, insurance, and debt all rise at the same time, people start questioning whether the system still works for them. And that's exactly why we see more Canadians explore opportunities in the United States than we have in years, especially younger professionals. So, which country is actually more affordable? Honestly, for ambitious high-income earners, the US probably wins financially, especially if you're healthy, career-driven, and living in the right state. But for families, for stability, for healthcare security, and for overall balance, Canada still offers a quality of life that's hard to replicate. And at the end of the day, the best country is the one that matches your lifestyle goals, not somebody else's. Now, I'm curious, if you had the opportunity tomorrow, would you choose Canada or the United States? Comment down below. And if you want more videos comparing cities, cost of living, real estate trends, and what life is actually like across Canada, make sure to subscribe because we got a ton more coming. And I'll see you in the next video.